Hello everyone, this is Stjepan and welcome back to Hanging Pawns. I'll continue the coverage of round 5 of the Candidates tournament, and the game I'm about to show you was by far the most exciting one of round 5. And in this game Levon Aronian had the white pieces against Alexander Grischuk, and he kicked off with pawn to d4. We have knight to f6, as so many times in the Candidate so far, c4. But Grischuk now plays king g6, not going for e6, which was usually played in the tournament, and usually a Catalan position would rise. And Aronian plays f3, going for the same-ish king's Indian. If Grischuk plays bishop to g7, they will enter the variation, but Alexander doesn't go for that. He plays the most aggressive move in this position, c5. And after d5 by Aronian, they have now entered the weird Benoni position by transposition, and to see the modern Benoni in the Candidates is absolutely unbelievable, if you ask me. The opening is sharp and unpredictable, but now in this exact position, with f3 from white interposed, black already has a slight edge since he is now ahead in development, and it's not the same as the normal move order of the modern Benoni. Grischuk continues with d6, we have e4, and d6 by Grischuk, which isn't precise. Much better was bishop to g7 developing or checking with the queen on a5. And now the position is equal again. Grischuk gave away his edge with e6, and Levon Aronian responds with knight to c3. Not aggressive, but just a normal developing move. We have e takes d5 and c takes d5 by Levon. Much better was to take with the e-pawn, but perhaps Aronian wanted to copy the standard Benoni pawn structure with pawns on d5 and d4 for white. Unfortunately, in this exact position with f3 interposed, it wasn't the right choice. Bishop to g7 by Alexander Grischuk, knight g to e2 developing, knight bd7 and knight g3 by Levon, wasting a few tempi to get the knight to a pretty awkward square, considering that the pawn is already on g6 and the knight isn't able to get to f5 or h5. And Grischuk immediately punishes that with h5. He punishes Aronian for wasting 2 tempi to remaneuver the knight, and now he's threatening to dislodge it with h4. Bishop to e2 by Aronian. And now a strange move by Grischuk. Instead of logically following up with h4 or playing an attacking move like knight to e5, centralizing and getting the knight to the best possible square, he plays a maneuver which undevelops and gives Aronian the initiative and the slight advantage once again. He plays the weird knight to h7, planning to transfer the knight to g4, but is that really such a big point to that move? If the knight gets to g4, so what? It doesn't do much on the square. Bishop to f4. Finally striking at the d6 pawn, the Achilles heel of the Benoni structure, and most of Benoni games which black loses are because he was unable to keep defending d6, which is backward and horribly weak. Queen to e7 defending, queen to d2, and h4 finally using the opportunity to chase the knight away. Knight goes to f1, g5, gaining even more space, and bishop retreats to e3, and now knight to e5. And after a series of aggressive moves, Grischuk now stands equal or even a bit better. He managed to grab a lot of space on the king side, and the only thing he has to improve is the knight he voluntarily placed on h7. Had he not done that, he would stand much better now already, and perhaps even he would even be winning. g3 by Levon, striking at black's advanced pawns, bishop to d7. And now g takes h4 by Aronian. And in this position, Alexander had a great move. He had an opportunity to play a great move, but he missed it. He took the pawn with g takes h4. But what he could have played in this position was g4, pushing the pawn forward and attacking h4 with the queen, and also threatening g takes f3, ruining Aronian's king safety, because the pawn would be attacked twice. So Aronian would have to choose whether he wants to lose h4 with check by the queen or just lose the f-pawn, and then of course he can't take with the bishop because knight takes f3 would be a fork. So we have g takes h4, and in this position white stands a bit better because black did this. This is actually a horrible move. Now Aronian doesn't use it the best way possible. He plays rook to g1. What he should have played instead was f4 immediately, chasing the knight away and gaining space. But rook to g1 is attacking the bishop, so he thought he had enough time. Grischuk defends indirectly with f5, opening up the queen to the bishop, and f4 in this position. chasing away the knight and gaining space in the center by Aronian. And now his central pawn structure already looks a bit dangerous, because there's always now a possibility for him to play e5 if the knight should move, and the knight has to move. It goes to g4 and e5 immediately by Aronian. A very energetic move, offering a potential pawn sacrifice for the initiative, which Grischuk accepts immediately. D takes e5, and now of course not f takes e5, which would be losing, but the aggressive d6. And this is now a pretty dangerous passed pawn Grischuk will have to look out for the rest of the game. Queen retreats to e6. We have knight to b5, the best move, the most aggressive move, and Aronian is just much better now. He's +2. As Benoni positions tend to be, the advantage switches every couple of moves in this game as well, but that's the beauty of rarely played positions, and the players don't know them, they don't count on playing them in tournaments as strong as the candidates, and that's why these openings produce interesting unexplored positions. And here in this position, after knight to b5, Grischuk has to give up his bishop pair. He has to take the knight on b5. Instead, he plays rook c8, which is a very weird move. It defends c7 sort of, but it doesn't really. He gets the rook away from the fork, but not the queen, which is also threatened. And Aronian plays a check with knight to c7, and Grischuk now has to give up the exchange or lose the queen. So this was a pretty weird decision, I must say. Wasn't it better to just give up the bishop pair rather than the exchange? But I don't know what he was thinking about. Perhaps he saw a reason to do this. So now rook takes c7 and d takes c7, and now this passed pawn on c7 is one square away from queening, and this is now looking worse and worse for black. Grischuk now captures the pawn on f4 with e takes f4. And in this position, Aronian shows his brilliance. He doesn't just recapture on f4 with bishop takes, he sacrifices a piece with rook to d1. Unfortunately, rook to d1 misses a slight nuance in the position. This line after rook d1 leads to a forced draw if both sides play perfectly, and had he just played castle slong instead of that, getting the rook to d1 anyway, but getting the king to safety as well, at the same time, he would have been completely winning. Here's why. After e takes f4, if he didn't play rook d1 but castle long, then the king is much safer, and the best move for black in this position would be bishop to e5, trying to defend. And bishop to f4 in this position, bishop f4, queen takes f4, and now notice how strong the c7 pawn is. Black can of course capture the bishop on e2, so queen takes e2, rook takes g4, getting rid of the knight, f takes g4, knight to e3, and now the queen and the knight are coordinating so well with the c-pawn that the black king actually has no squares to go to except for e7, and it's almost checkmated. So it could continue with knight to f8, which would be the most defensive try, knight to f5, threatening knight d6 check and knight g7 check, queen takes d1, that's the only move. In this position for black, he has to give up the queen. If he doesn't take the queen, if he plays, let's say, knight to e6, a defensive trying to chase away the queen or grab the c-pawn, then just knight to d6 check, king e7, and queen would checkmate. The position is so strong that black has absolutely nothing to do, and it's actually pretty hard for white to make a mistake after castles long in this position. The king is so unsafe on e8 that in combination with the c-pawn, white is just completely winning. And after e takes f4, he doesn't play that, he plays rook to d1, which is inferior because now his king is in the center as well. And perhaps he was fearing checks on the c1 h6 diagonal, because the king would be unsafe, a bit unsafe there as well, or he was perhaps scared of queen taking on a2 after castles long, but there is nothing that black could have done to save himself. And after rook to d1, now Grischuk plays knight to g5, and in both of these variations, the position, the point is of course that white can queen his c-pawn, and after bishop takes he gets a lot of initiative in the attack. So here he plays c8 queen, and after bishop takes, now the d8 square is not covered anymore, so queen d8 check. And the difference between the king being on c1 is huge, because now black, if white plays perfectly, black now has a drawing possibility. So king f7, queen c7 check, and here a draw would have been almost certain had Grischuk played correctly with queen to e7 covering the check, and they would have traded queens. Instead he played the horrible king to g8, and now Aronian just plays rook d6, and this position is completely busted for black. White has more than +4 according to the engines, and he retreats to f7. And now what Aronian was thinking here in this position is a complete mystery to me. What he should do is take the bishop on c8, and that's it. He should take the bishop, say thanks very much, and win easily. Instead, he plays the... I just don't understand his move. He plays queen to d8 check. Why? Why? There's no reason, absolutely no reason not to take the bishop, but to check one square farther away. I can't understand it. And now, in this position, Grischuk is not equal, he's in fact a bit better. Aronian completely blew it with this absurd mistake. I can't even call it a mistake. It's just completely illogical. Now, of course, queen to f8 just covering the check, and the bishop can no longer be taken. We have bishop to f4, taking f4 by Aronian, knight to e6, a bit of exchanges happen, bishop c4 pinning the knight so that it can't attack the queen, can't take the queen or the bishop, queen takes d8, rook takes d8, the knight is still pinned of course, king h7 unpinning, rook takes h8, trading a pair of rooks, bishop to d6 and knight to g5, and after all the madness, Grischuk managed to survive. In fact, he even has good winning chances. He has 2 pawns for the exchange and the clear advantage here, because the pawns are pretty strong, and his knights also look menacing around the white king. Rook to g2, defending the second rank, knight e4, bishop b8, attacking a7, bishop d4, almost waving a mating net around Aronian's king, h3 chasing away one of the knights, knight e5 attacking the bishop, bishop d5, knight to d3 check, king to e2, and now Grischuk goes mad and doesn't just grab the b2 pawn with the winning position, completely winning 3 pawns for the exchange, but he plays the useless, completely drawing knight to c1 check. Once again, and I can't understand this move either. King goes to d1, knight to d3, knight d2, knight to f6, attacking the bishop, bishop f3, and here the position is completely equal, and okay, they could have played on, but they agreed to draw. Perhaps they were so tired from all the calculation in the game that they just couldn't do it anymore, and I agree, the game was so complicated and the advantage switched 10 times from one side to the other, and here the game conducted, they just drew. I think both players must have felt relief when it was over and they stayed alive and didn't lose. It was such a chaotic game, and in one of the most chaotic openings, the Benoni. Unfortunately, it ended in a draw, same as the other 3 games in round 5, so not a very exciting day at the candidates tournament. But let's hope there are 4 decisive games tomorrow. Okay everyone, thanks for watching this madness on board, and see you soon with more chess analysis from the candidates. Cheers!